Earth Systems 3209, Unit 5, Earth's Resources. This unit can be referenced in the textbook in Chapters 21, and also in the curriculum guide in Appendix A and B. Unit 5, Topic 3.1. This topic will look at the formation of petroleum. This topic focuses on defining petroleum, crude oil, hydrocarbon, and kerogen. This topic will also focus on describing how the origin of petroleum is dependent on the abundance of organic matter and its preservation potential. Let's look at the terminology associated with petroleum. Petroleum is a naturally occurring flammable liquid that is found in geologic formations below Earth's surface and consists of a mixture of hydrocarbons. Petroleum is also referred to as crude oil. However, both crude oil and natural gas are accepted under the term petroleum. Another term that's associated with petroleum would be crude oil. Crude oil is a mixture of hydrocarbons that exist in liquid state in underground reservoirs and remain in liquid state once subjected to atmospheric conditions. Crude oil is what is extracted from the surface or beneath the surface and is eventually refined to produce different fuels. Hydrocarbons are chemical compounds that involve hydrogen and carbon atoms. Examples of hydrocarbons include butane, propane, ethane, and methane. When these gases are together, they are referred to as wet gases. Note that if predominantly methane exists by itself, then it is referred to as a dry gas. And the last term that we'll look at is kerogen. Kerogen is a mixture of organic matter in sediments from which petroleum is released. Let us look at the origin and the process of formation of petroleum. When petroleum is formed, it mainly focuses on two conditions. The first condition is the organic matter. The origin of petroleum lies in the organic matter contained in the tissues of living things. Microscopic marine animals, such as zooplankton, and plants, phytoplankton, are the main sources of organic matter in the oceans. Such microscopic species are diatoms, foraminifera, radiolarian, and benthic algae. These organisms can be seen in the diagrams below, which are microscopic, and they accumulate on the ocean floor, which eventually will end up in sediment as organic matter. Text references for this topic can be found in the textbook on pages 602 to 603. The abundance of organic matter in the oceans is determined by several factors. These factors include the amount of light, the water depth, the latitude, the water temperature, water turbidity, and the abundance of nutrients preferred by plants. Example, phosphates and nitrates. These 6 conditions will determine the amount and abundance of organic matter in the oceans. When we look at the organic matter, the origin of petroleum lies in the organic matter that is contained in the tissues of living things. This organic matter has a low preservation potential because of scavenging organisms and aerobic microbes that naturally break down and recycle the organic matter. However, organic matter is often accumulated in quiet, low-oxygen water environments, which aids in its preservation. This organic matter is stored in fine-grained sedimentary and carbonate rocks, and these rocks contain the primary source of organic matter from which the petroleum is eventually generated. The rocks that contain the organic-rich material are often referred to as source rocks. And these source rocks are the origin from which petroleum is extracted. Upon burial, the organic matter breaks down and releases biogenic gases, primarily methane, leaving a residue enriched in hydrocarbons. As the hydrocarbon-rich organic matter within the source rock is buried deeper and is subjected to higher and higher temperatures, it is transformed into a solid waxy substance called kerogen. And this is the material by which petroleum is extracted. The second condition that the formation of petroleum depends on is referred to as its preservation potential. Preservation potential refers to the conditions that favor the preservation of organic matter. Two of the most important conditions that preserve organic matter focuses on the anaerobic conditions, which is a low oxygen environment. Anaerobic conditions can exist in swamp areas and also lagoonal environments. The second condition that the preservation potential depends on is the rapid sedimentation by fine-grained material. Examples of fine-grained materials include clay or mud-sized particles, silt-sized particles, and sand-sized particles. So the preservation potential are controlled by two main conditions. And these conditions are the anaerobic conditions, which is prone to low oxygen environments, and the rapid sedimentation by fine-grained material. If these two conditions are present, the organic material can be preserved and eventually form into kerogen, which then we can extract petroleum. Let's look at some examples. Example number 1 reads, under which conditions has kerogen matured enough to produce crude oil that migrates into traps? Kerogen is produced under relatively shallow burial and are not exposed to extremely high temperatures. So the answer to this question would be D, shallow burial, low temperatures, generally below 100 degrees Celsius, and burial usually below 1 kilometer in depth, and is exposed to relatively low pressures. So the answer to this question, example number 1, is D. Example number 2 reads, which two factors are essential to the formation of petroleum? When we look at the two conditions necessary for the formation of petroleum, those will be the two that's based on their preservation potential. And the preservation potential of organic matter will be seen here in choice C. The organic matter that's present and the anaerobic conditions, which means low oxygen environment, which would also be present. So two factors that are essential for the formation of petroleum will be the presence of organic matter and anaerobic conditions, which will be a low oxygen environment. Second question reads, what is the name of a waxy organic matter found in sedimentary rocks which contain petroleum? The answer to this question will be B, kerogen. Kerogen will be the organic matter by which petroleum is extracted. Your turn. Take the time and complete the following question. You can pause the recording now, and the answer to this question will be on the following slide. The question reads, which geologic setting is associated with the formation of oil reserves? Choices include an evaporating sea in an arid climate where evaporate minerals are forming, a tropical sea with plenty of plankton and steady deposition of fine-grained sediments, a warm swampy region with little vegetation dying, which is buried rapidly, and D choice, a dry environment where desert sands are deposited and buried deeply. The conditions by which we need oil to form would be focused in choice B. So your answer to this question would be B. Which geologic setting is associated with the formation of oil reserves? The tropical sea, which has plenty of plankton dying, which is the organic source, and a steady deposition of fine-grained sediments, which would provide an anaerobic, low oxygen environment. So the answer to this question would be B. Let's look at an overview of the points covered in this presentation. Some of the terms associated with petroleum include crude oil, hydrocarbons, and kerogen. And these three terms will be discussed in later presentations when we look at the formation of oil and oil traps. When we look at petroleum, the preservation potential is very important for the production of petroleum. And the preservation potential depends on, number one, the anaerobic conditions, that's low oxygen content in a low oxygen environment. And number two, the rapid sedimentation by fine-grained material, such as clay, mud, silt, and very fine sand. When we look at the origin of petroleum, the origin of petroleum involves, number one, the presence of microscopic organisms which contain the organic matter. These can be phytoplankton and zooplankton, which are found in oceans. The second point involved in the origin of petroleum involves the accumulation of organic matter in a fine sediment, and this would form your source rock. Third point of origin would be the burial and a breakdown of the organic matter. The fourth condition would be the formation of hydrocarbons, and the fifth, the changing of the hydrocarbons into a material called kerogen. So these are the main points involved in the origin of petroleum.